Is there a joint German-US plan to force the Ukrainian president into peace negotiations? That's at least what a German newspaper is suggesting. We'll talk about this in this situation report about the developments along the front line, where we obviously will also talk what's happening on the ground as well. Hello and welcome. We'll start with the overall situation. In the night from the 24th to the 25th, there was a massive air attack on Ukraine with Shahid drones. According to the Ukrainian reports, the Russians used 75 Shahid drones, of which the Ukrainians shot down 71, so a very high shot-down ratio in this regard. On the eastern front, north of the Seversky Donetsk, we have continued fighting, but there is actually a Ukrainian success close here at Avdiivka to the northeast of it. The Ukrainians have, by deploying reserves, been able to reconquer some important positions to hold the flanks of Avdiivka. Other than that, no change along the front line, so we're not wasting our time and go directly further south. South of the Seversky Donetsk, we have continued fighting as well, and here the Russians are advancing. They managed to take over all this tree line here on the northern bank of the railway line, where they were pushing towards Klishivka in the recent days. Further south, the Ukrainians, on the other hand, gained some ground in the direction south here, in the direction of Kurdyumivka, that they advanced 400 meters along the railway line in that tree line here. That's all we have for changes around this area, so we'll go directly down to Avdiivka. We have Ukrainian counterattacks again happening in the area of Stepove. The 47th Mechanized Brigade, that is equipped with Leopard 2A6 and with Bradley IFVs, is deployed there and is doing counterattacks and trying to push the Russians back. They have been spotted here inside of town, but some parts of the tree line here are definitely still within Russian hands. We do have the report that the Ukrainians were actually surprised in the south here, where the Russians managed to gain some more ground in this Dacha area here, and they were doing so by they achieved this by using a bomb. According to the reports, they actually did mining work, digging under the Ukrainian position, blowing up a bomb. One time, this is the explosion that supposedly happened. One report says 500 kilo, another one says 500 pounds. And whether it was an aerial bomb being used by that isn't completely clear. But what we do see here now is supposedly the Russians that, after having blown that up, the next day they dug an opening into that crater, which was obviously still connected to the tunnel they used to plant that bomb here. And through that tunnel, they managed to leave the crater and surprise the Ukrainians to gain additional ground in this regard. Further south, the fighting had also continued, but we do not have any change here. As said, for Avdiivka, the only significant change is that extension here, and by using mining work, basically a tactic as old as warfare itself, but I think it should be the first time it was employed in this war. Fighting is also still continuing here in the industrial area, but I do not have any confirmed change in the area, in the territory. A Ukrainian mill blogger is talking about the situation here, and he's not leaving great hopes for Ukraine. He's basically saying we are inferior in every regard. In manpower, in material, in artillery, in drones, in all regards, the Russians are superior to us. It still seems fairly unlikely that the Russians will be able to take Avdiivka until the end of the year, but they have brought in fresh reinforcements, and the third wave of their big attacks seem to be happening right now, even though the Ukrainians, for now at least, managed to hold the tide fairly well over the last few days. Further south, additional fighting as usual. Marinka, no change. Novomikhailivka, no change. On the oblast border, no change in regards that we have Russian attacks along various parts, but some change that we have a bigger Ukrainian attack. That's not being just called a sabotage attempt or something, an infiltration attempt towards Priutne, but there again, no change in territory. We do have some change in territory though, south of Orikhiv, here in that area. First of all, we do have a Russian success close to Novoprokopivka and Verbove. The Russians were spotted here, and this is, I found it last time. Let's just hope I'll find it fast enough. This is, I think, here. Now this is this piece here, this, and we are 1, 2, 3 lines. So 1, 2, 3 lines. They have been spotted more or less here. They are pushing in this direction. The Ukrainians, on the other hand, have managed to get closer to Novoprokopivka. Here, another geolocalization happened where a drone attack is done on a Ukrainian position, and that position was geolocalized here. So we have a more or less here, we do know that the Ukrainians have positions there. Not just men walking around, but they were in a shelter, showing that they had soldiers there. So probably the Ukrainian area of control should extend to that point as of now. But that's it from this area. Vasiliivka area, we have no change. On the Dnipro, we have no change either. The Ukrainians are bringing in reinforcements that are reported, and the fighting is continuing. The Ukrainians try to reach that road here, but I cannot see that they have had success in this regard over the last 3 days. The Russians try to prevent the reinforcements of those units that are coming by boat from this area, usually using the Konka, the river that is going here through the marshland, to reach Krinky. We do see some videos of attacks on those boats, but the majority seems to come through. And as said, I can't confirm, I can't observe any change in territory here. On the Crimean Peninsula, on the night of the 23rd to the 24th, we had a big Ukrainian drone attack. The Russians are reporting that 13 aerial drones were used and 12 USV, so water drones, naval drones. They say they shot down everything, but there are reported explosions, and there's video of explosions on the horizon that are supposedly from Chankoi, which is here, and the reports, the claims are that radar and air defense installations have been hit. We do not know whether A, that's true, and B, whether it was done with drones or with something else, but at least there seem to have been some explosions in this area. Overall, we have news that Zelensky had released, basically fired, several generals of the National Guard, among them the first deputy head and 3 deputies. The reason for that isn't completely clear yet, but the big bombshell news is obviously the German tabloid Bild said it's, according to its research, Germany and the US, basically Scholz, the German chancellor, and the US President Biden want to force Zelensky to enter negotiations with Russia. Their way of doing it is by moderating quality and quantity of weapon deliveries so that Zelensky comes to his senses, basically, and gets the own idea of the necessity for negotiations. That's at least what Bild says. Basically, they want to put it into a catchphrase. They want to deliver Ukraine enough that they don't die, but not enough to live. According to the reports, the plans are to deliver exactly enough for Ukraine to allow to hold the front line, but not enough for them to advance further. They also have an alternative plan. The plan B supposedly is that they want to freeze the front line, but the talks of as long as it takes and to allow Ukraine to reach its international border seems to be gone by now, at least if the tabloid hasn't reported something wrong here, something false here. In both cases, though, we have to say for negotiations to be anything more but a Ukrainian capitulation, it would lead to the necessity for anything in a negotiation that is more than a Ukrainian capitulation would be a Russian acknowledgement of the fact that they can't win the war by themselves. And this is right now extremely unlikely. Russia has changed its economy increasingly onto a war footing. They are able to recruit enough without additional mobilization waves to keep them going, to allow themselves to more or less hold the front line, and to even throw away thousands of men in offensives that they themselves anytime soon think that peace negotiations where they give in, this is the thing, like where they are willing to make compromises, seems to be fairly low at this point. But if the tabloid is right, then both Germany and the US, the two most important nations to deliver weapons to Ukraine, both of them have decided that the aim to allow Ukraine, to enable Ukraine to win the war, is no longer their war aim. We have news about troop generation. The Russians, as we said, they are working on gaining additional personnel. We have here opposition media talking about raids on a storage facility of wild berries, which is something like, maybe we could call it a Russian Amazon to make it easy. And there they detained migrants, and according to them and according to a Russian mill blogger, the police detained 135 migrants that had recently gained Russian citizenship to force them into the recruitment system to basically prosecute them for draft dodging. The interpretation of the words are kind of open, so we don't really know whether they are going to force them to sign up for military service or whether they are just being threatened to basically register for future conscriptions. But regardless, this is one of the contexts where we see that how Russia intends to how Russia intends to recruit its personnel. And we have that confirmed here by BBC Russia, that they are tracing the official death, basically the obituaries, I think is the word, when in newspapers are published that somebody died. This is obviously far away from the reality of Russian losses, but it gives them some kind of ballpark. And there we see that the majority of the losses in percentage according to the inhabitants are in Tiva, Buryatia, in Nenets, and in Altai and Transbaikal. So basically, east of the Urals is where the majority of the losses are happening, usually among minorities, whereas the two cities that count for the Russian government, St. Petersburg and Moscow, it's like up to almost 50 times as low, the loss ratio of citizenship to war death that can be recorded in this regard. So we see the Russian focus on migrants, and it seems to on migrants and minorities, and it seems to be fairly well working, at least when we regard the Russian plans. And then Rostec, the Russian defense company, has presented its anti-drone system. We see it here, and it has a range of 1,000 meters, and it can run for 100 minutes. And then some military blogger checked around on Alibaba and found this. And you can compare it. Just that this is like, even the latches look similar. Now, obviously, there are some tiny differences. The buttons are at a little different point, and here is something else. But the Chinese supposedly has a range of 1,500 meters, not just 1,000. The battery supposedly is lasting a tiny bit longer, and it's lighter as well. So interesting thing that what the Russian Defense Ministry is presenting here, while Alibaba is offering delivery of this more or less for free, as we can see here. According to the US, Iran is delivering gliding bombs and might be delivering short-range ballistic missiles to Russia. Now, the sanctions having stopped on Iran about ballistic missiles, it would be legally possible for Iran to sell ballistic missiles to other nations, to hand them over to other nations. And this is a fear that is like existing since last year, that Iran could use its massive inventory and cash in by handing it over to Russia. From the political sphere, we have additional reports again about the deportation of children from Ukraine. Among them are babies from Kherson that have been taken from orphanages. They have been adopted into Russian families and thus will obviously be raised as Russians. This is in context with the accusations all the time that Russia wants to Russify Ukraine and basically stealing children to turn them into Russians. And this is the right moment to mention that the Holodomor was just remembered. Holodomor happened in 1932 to 1933, where millions of Ukrainians died in a famine that was deliberately started by the Soviet dictator Stalin in Ukraine and is by many countries nowadays acknowledged as a genocide. International support. We have news that Ukraine will get an improved air defense because there is a new alliance setting up to aid Ukraine with this. The alliance is being led by Germany and France with the specific goal to improve Ukraine's air defense systems. Probably in this context already, Germany announced to deliver another Patriot battery that is going to be given to Ukraine. From other countries, there's also aid coming. Canada just announced the delivery of 11,000 assault rifles with 9 million rounds of small arms ammunition. Troops, we have some information too. There was a BBC documentary published a week ago that said that over 40,000 Ukrainian men either try to flee Ukraine or manage to flee Ukraine and then get asylum to dodge the draft. According to them, Ukrainian commenters in that documentary, that's unpleasant, but it's 1 to 5%, so it's not going to be the one thing that is going to break Ukrainian mobilization, Ukrainian recruitment. And in this context is a new announcement by Zelensky that he wants to change something with mobilization. We don't really have details yet, but it seems to be that the conscripts are supposed to rotate because the conscripts have been kept in the army and the last conscripts that were supposed to be called up weren't even called up. So which obviously leads to the fact that some soldiers are now for 2 years in the armed forces while they were just supposed to do their conscription. And apparently there is pressure from the families of those that they aren't supposed to stay along the front line until they are expended. So there's probably going to be some rotation, that some will actually within the war be demobilized while others are being called up, to have some troop rotation. And I guess it's absolutely necessary to give soldiers the hope that they just have to survive a certain amount of time and then they will actually be able to go home, which should probably raise morale as well if they don't feel like they have to stay along the front line until it's all over, and which will probably take years now. At least that's what should be expected at that point. We have pictures of Leopard 1A5 now in Ukraine. They are with the 44th Mechanized Brigade in Kharkiv. They have been recently spotted here. Leopard 1, obviously the generally obsolete MBT from Germany that is going to be given to Ukraine in serious numbers. Several hundreds are up for talks, and they are still finding some here and there that can be given to them. While the armor isn't the greatest, it should be more or less sufficient frontally for autocannons, at least at longer ranges. Its cannon is only 105 millimeter, but it will do the trick. So not a bad item, just nothing great, but obviously several hundred of them are a great improvement for Ukraine. And there's also news from Switzerland. We finally have reached the point that Switzerland has confirmed that they're going to hand over 25 Leopard 2A4 to Germany. The conditions are that Germany is not allowed to give them to Ukraine, but the talks, the media at least, is already speculating that they might be given to Poland, and Poland will in return give 25 of its Leopard 2A4 to Ukraine, thus allowing the Swiss to not having delivered weapons to Ukraine while they basically enabled others to deliver weapons to Ukraine. That's it from me for now already. Leave your comment in the comment section. What do you think about that peace plan? That plan supposedly to force Ukraine into peace. And if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. This channel is only possible because of the support of viewers like you. If you like to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. Thank you very much to everyone already doing this. And that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.